It was late at night and the storm was fierce. Rain hammered my truck's roof and the wipers fought hard against the downpour. The highway was empty, just me and my rig pushing through the dark. Tall trees lined the road, their shapes barely visible through the sheets of rain. Occasionally a clearing would appear, but it only made the night seem darker. My name is Mark. I've been a truck driver for over a decade, used to the long, lonely drives. But this storm was something else, making the road slippery and dangerous. I kept my eyes on the road, my hands tight on the wheel. The rhythm of the rain was almost hypnotic, but I couldn't let my guard down. As I drove through this remote stretch of highway, the sense of isolation was strong. It felt like I was the only person left in the world. The storm showed no signs of letting up, and the forest around me seemed endless. The night was thick, and my headlights barely cut through the rain. I knew I had to stay focused. Out here in the middle of nowhere, anything could happen. I squinted through the rain and noticed a figure on the side of the road. They were drenched, shivering, and waving their arms frantically. My first instinct was to keep driving. It's not safe to pick up strangers, especially in the middle of a storm like this. But something about their desperation made me slow down. My sense of decency won out over my caution. I pulled over and rolled down the window just enough to hear. "Need a lift?" I called out, trying to sound calm. The figure nodded vigorously and hurried to the passenger side. It was a young woman, soaking wet and shivering. She climbed into the truck, dripping water everywhere. "Thank you so much," she said, her voice trembling. "I'm Lisa." "No problem," I replied, handing her a towel I kept for emergencies. "What are you doing out here in this weather?" Lisa's eyes were wide with fear. "I'm running away from my partner. He's abusive. I had to get out before he did something worse." I could see the relief in her eyes, but it was mixed with a deep, underlying fear. "You're safe now," I told her, trying to sound reassuring. "We'll get you to a police station." "Thank you," she whispered, clutching the towel. I didn't think anyone would stop. As we started driving again, I noticed Lisa kept looking at the side mirrors. Her anxiety was growing more evident with every passing minute. I tried to make conversation to distract her. "So, where are you from?" I asked. She told me a bit about her life, but her answers were short, and her eyes kept darting to the mirrors. I could feel the tension building in the truck. The rain kept pounding, the road ahead barely visible. I tried to focus on driving, but Lisa's unease was contagious. Every now and then I glanced at the mirrors too, trying to see what she was so worried about. The storm made it hard to see anything clearly, but I started to feel like we weren't alone on this road. The sense of isolation I felt earlier was gone, replaced by a creeping sense of dread. I asked if everything was okay, and Lisa shook her head, saying she just could not shake the feeling that he is following her. She said he would not let her go that easily. I tried to stay calm for her sake. I told her not to worry, as I would get her somewhere safe. But inside I was starting to feel worried. The storm, the dark road, Lisa's constant fear. It was all getting to me. I kept driving, but now I was on high alert. We drove in silence for a while, the only sound the relentless rain and the occasional clap of thunder. Lisa's fear was palpable, and I could feel my own nerves tightening. Something wasn't right. I just hoped we'd reach help before anything happened. Lisa suddenly stiffened beside me and told me to take the next left, with urgency, as she explained he knows her usual routes, and that we needed to change it up. I hesitated, but the fear in her voice made me agree. The left turn led to a narrower, more secluded road. It wasn't the safest option, but Lisa seemed convinced it was necessary. We turned onto the smaller road, the trees closing in around us, their branches casting eerie shadows in the headlights. The rain made everything look ghostly, the road winding through the dense forest. A few miles later, I glanced in the rearview mirror, and my heart skipped a beat. There was a car behind us, its headlights piercing through the rain. Lisa saw it too, and her panic flared. "It's him!" she exclaimed, her voice trembling. "I know it!" I tried to keep calm. "It could be anyone," I said, but I kept an eye on the car. It was following us at a steady distance, not too close but not falling back either. The sense of being hunted grew stronger. Suddenly, the car behind us sped up, its headlights growing brighter in the mirrors. Lisa's fear turned to outright terror. "He's trying to catch us. Please, Mark, you have to go faster." I didn't need any more convincing. I pressed down on the gas, the truck lurching forward. The car behind us matched our speed, closing the gap. I could see the driver now, a dark figure behind the wheel, the car's front bumper almost touching our rear. The road was slick, the rain relentless. I had to navigate carefully, but the car kept pushing, trying to force us off the road. The truck swerved as I fought to keep control, my knuckles white on the steering wheel. Lisa was crying now, her fear overwhelming. "We need to lose him," she cried. "He won't stop until he gets us." In a desperate move, I remembered a hidden dirt path from previous trips. It was barely visible in the dark and rain, but I knew it could be our only chance. I spotted the turn just in time and yanked the wheel hard to the right. The truck skidded onto the dirt path, mud spraying up from the tires. The pursuing car tried to follow but couldn't handle the sharp turn on the slick surface. I heard a crash behind us and saw the car slam into the trees, its headlights flickering and then going dark. I didn't stop to check. We had to keep moving. I pushed the truck as fast as I dared down the narrow, bumpy path. The rain was still pouring, but the sense of immediate danger had lessened. We had to get to the nearest town, where there would be people and police. Lisa was sobbing in the seat beside me, a mix of relief and lingering fear. I kept driving, focused on the road ahead. The storm still raged, but for the first time since I picked her up, I felt a glimmer of hope. We might just make it out of this alive. We finally saw the lights of a small town ahead. Relief washed over me as I steered the truck toward the police station, its sign barely visible through the rain. I parked as close to the entrance as I could and turned to Lisa. "We're here. Let's get inside." We bolted from the truck and dashed through the rain, bursting into the station. It was small and quiet, with just a couple of officers on duty. They looked up, surprised to see us in such a state. "Help us, please," I panted, my breath coming in gasps. "She's in danger. Her partner is after us." Lisa nodded, still shaking. "He's an ex-cop," she added, her voice barely a whisper. "He won't stop until he finds me." The officers exchanged glances, the situation clearly more serious than they had first thought. They quickly ushered us to a back room, away from any windows. One of them, Officer Jenkins, took our statements, while the other, Officer Carter, went to make some calls. As we told our story, Lisa's fear began to shift into determination. She recounted the abuse she'd suffered, the threats, and how she'd finally managed to escape. I filled in the details of our terrifying chase through the storm. Officer Jenkins nodded, taking detailed notes. "We'll handle this," he assured us. "We'll put out an alert and keep you both safe. You did the right thing coming here." Officer Carter returned, looking serious. "We've got patrols looking for his car," he said. "If he's out there, we'll find him." Lisa looked at me, tears of relief in her eyes. "Thank you, Mark. I don't know what I would have done without you." I gave her a small, reassuring smile. "You're safe now. That's all that matters." We sat in the station, the storm still raging outside, but the sense of immediate danger had passed. The officers were taking action, and for the first time that night, I felt like we might actually be okay. The ordeal wasn't over, but we had help, and that made all the difference. As the hours passed, we learned more about Lisa's situation. Her partner had been using his skills and connections as an ex-cop to track her down, abusing his authority to terrorize her. The officers explained that he had been manipulating the system, making it nearly impossible for her to escape him until now. I couldn't shake the thought of how close we came to a fatal encounter. If I hadn't stopped to pick her up, who knows what might have happened. The responsibility I felt was overwhelming. I had saved Lisa from a terrifying fate, but the danger she was in was far from over. The police assured us they would keep her safe and pursue legal action against her partner. They arranged for a safe place for Lisa to stay and provided resources to help her navigate the legal proceedings. I decided to keep in touch with her, offering my support in any way I could. As I got back on the road, resuming my trucking routes, I couldn't help but feel forever changed by that night. Helping Lisa made me realize the importance of looking out for others, even when it's risky. The experience haunted me, a constant reminder of the night I chose to help a stranger in need. It was a night that changed both our lives, and I knew I would never forget it. Every time I saw a hitchhiker or a car in distress, I remembered Lisa and the terror she had faced. I drove with a heightened sense of vigilance, knowing that out there on those lonely roads, someone might be in desperate need of help, just like Lisa had been. And I promised myself that if I ever found myself in a similar situation again, I would be ready. It was late at night and the storm was raging. Rain poured down in thick sheets, making it hard to see more than a few feet ahead. Thunder rumbled in the distance and flashes of lightning lit up the sky. I was driving carefully through the storm, my hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. The windshield wipers were working as fast as they could, but it felt like they were barely keeping up with the rain. My name is Sarah, and I grew up with 4 brothers. They taught me everything about cars, so I'm confident behind the wheel. Tonight I was driving home after visiting my parents. The road was deserted, and the thick woods on either side made it feel even more isolated. The sound of the rain pounding on the roof was constant. I knew I had to stay focused. This stretch of road was particularly lonely, and in a storm like this, anything could happen. As I drove, the headlights of my car cut through the darkness, barely illuminating the wet asphalt. I could feel the tires splashing through puddles, and I kept my speed slow to avoid hydroplaning. The dense woods seemed to close in around me, the tall trees swaying in the wind. I had a long drive ahead of me, and the storm showed no signs of letting up. The night felt endless, and the isolation was starting to get to me. I just wanted to get home safely, but I knew I had to be prepared for anything. Out here, in the middle of nowhere, you never knew what might happen. As I drove through the storm, my eyes caught a flicker of light ahead. I squinted through the rain and saw a car on the side of the road with its hazard lights blinking. A middle-aged man stood beside it, looking lost and stranded. The sight of him, drenched and shivering, pulled at my heart. I knew I had to stop. My brothers had always taught me to help when I could, especially when it came to car troubles. I slowed down and pulled over, rolling down my window just enough to call out, "Need some help?" The man's face lit up with relief. "Yes, please," he replied, his voice barely audible over the rain. "My name's Mike. My car just died and I don't know what's wrong with it. I don't know much about cars." I nodded and grabbed my flashlight. "I can take a look," I said, stepping out into the storm. The rain was cold and heavy, soaking through my clothes almost immediately. Mike watched as I approached his car. "Thank you so much," he said, sounding genuinely distressed. "I've been stuck here for a while, and I was starting to worry no one would come by." "No problem," I replied, opening the hood of his car and shining the flashlight inside. I expected to find some obvious issue, but everything looked fine. The engine was clean and all the connections seemed intact. There were no signs of a problem that would cause the car to break down. As I continued to inspect the engine, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Mike stood a little too calmly beside me, his demeanor almost eerie given the situation. Most people would be anxious or frustrated, but he seemed oddly relaxed. I glanced at him and forced a smile. "Everything looks fine under here," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Are you sure it just died on you?" "Yes," Mike replied, his expression not changing. "One moment I was driving and the next it just stopped. Do you think you can fix it?" I nodded slowly, feeling a knot of unease form in my stomach. "Let me check a few more things," I said, turning back to the engine. I reached for the battery connections, but they were secure. The spark plugs were clean and there was no sign of any leakage or damage. The storm raged on around us, the rain pounding on the roof of the car and the wind howling through the trees. I felt exposed and vulnerable, a sense of dread creeping over me. Mike's calmness in the midst of this chaos was unsettling, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong. I took a deep breath and stepped back from the car. "I'm not seeing anything wrong here," I said, turning to face Mike. "It doesn't make sense that it would just stop like that." Mike's smile was polite but didn't reach his eyes. "Maybe it's something you can't see," he suggested, his tone almost too casual. "I really appreciate you trying to help, though." I forced a nod, my instincts screaming at me to leave. "Yeah, maybe, but I think you should call for a tow truck. They might be able to figure it out better than I can out here in the rain." Mike's expression darkened for just a moment before he nodded. "You're right. Thanks for your help." I took a step back, ready to get back to my car and drive away. But as I turned, a sudden realization struck me. I hadn't heard the car try to start. Not once had Mike attempted to turn the ignition. My heart raced as I processed this new detail, the sense of unease growing stronger. I turned back to the car, trying to steady my breathing. I needed to get out of here, but something was nagging at me. The car seemed too perfect, too clean. I shined my flashlight inside, scanning the interior. That's when I saw it, a small camera, partially hidden, positioned to record everything happening in front of the car. My heart skipped a beat. This wasn't right. Why would there be a hidden camera in a car that just broke down? My unease grew into outright fear. This situation was far from innocent. I tried to stay calm as I turned back to Mike. "I noticed you have a camera in your car," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "What's that for?" Mike's face twitched slightly. "Oh, that," he said, attempting to sound casual. "It's just for insurance purposes, in case of accidents." But his tone had shifted, becoming more menacing. He started to move closer to me, subtly blocking my path back to my car. My instincts were screaming at me to run. "I think I've done all I can here," I said quickly, taking a step back. "You should call for a tow truck. I really need to get going." Mike's demeanor changed completely. His polite smile vanished, replaced by a cold, predatory look. He reached out and grabbed my arm, his grip tight and painful. "You're not going anywhere," he hissed, trying to pull me back towards his car. I felt a cold panic come over me, but I remembered what my brothers had taught me. I twisted my arm sharply, breaking free from his grasp. Without hesitation, I turned and ran towards my car, my heart pounding in my chest. Mike was right behind me, his footsteps splashing through the puddles. I reached my car and fumbled with the keys, my hands shaking. Just as I got the door open, Mike lunged, trying to grab me again. I managed to slam the door shut, locking it just in time. He pounded on the window, shouting, but I didn't listen. I started the engine, adrenaline pumping through my veins. The tires screeched as I hit the gas, the car lurching forward. I didn't look back until I was a safe distance away. In the rearview mirror, I saw Mike's figure fading into the distance, standing alone in the pouring rain. His dark silhouette looked small and defeated. I kept driving, my mind racing with what had just happened. The storm raged on, but I felt a strange sense of relief wash over me. I had escaped, but I knew this night would haunt me forever. I drove straight to the nearest police station, my heart racing the whole way. The rain continued to pound on the roof of my car, but I barely noticed it. All I could think about was getting to safety. When I finally saw the lights of the police station, a wave of relief washed over me. I parked my car and rushed inside, still trembling from the encounter. The officers on duty looked up as I burst through the door, soaked and breathless. "Please, I need help," I said, my voice shaking. "There's a man out there. He tried to attack me. I think he's dangerous." The officers quickly ushered me to a chair and handed me a blanket. "Calm down," one of them said gently. "Tell us what happened." I took a deep breath and explained everything. From seeing the car on the side of the road to finding the hidden camera and the attack, the officers listened intently, taking notes and asking questions to get all the details. When I described Mike, one of the officers, Officer Jenkins, looked up sharply. "Did you say his name was Mike?" he asked. I nodded. "Yes, that's what he told me." Officer Jenkins exchanged a look with his colleague. "We've heard of him before. He's a notorious serial predator who uses broken-down cars to trap his victims. You're lucky you got away." Hearing those words made my blood run cold. I realized just how close I came to being one of his victims. The officers assured me they would investigate and that they were already on the lookout for him. "Thank you for coming in and telling us," Officer Jenkins said. "You did the right thing. Your quick thinking and bravery probably saved your life." Even though I was safe now, I couldn't shake the lingering fear. The realization of how close I had been to a terrible fate was overwhelming. I sat in the police station trying to calm down, but the memory of Mike's cold eyes and the sound of the rain still haunted me. The officers continued to reassure me, but I knew this experience would stay with me forever. I had escaped, but the fear and anxiety would take time to fade. I left the police station with a promise to myself to always trust my instincts and be more cautious in the future. In the days that followed, the police kept me informed about their investigation. They revealed that Mike had been using his charm and the pretense of car trouble to lure unsuspecting Good Samaritans into his trap. It was chilling to think how many others might have fallen for his act and not been as lucky as I was. The storm was fierce and it was late at night. Rain pounded on my windshield, making it hard to see the road ahead. The wipers were working overtime, but they could barely keep up with the downpour. I was driving through a remote highway, surrounded by thick woods, and my gas gauge was nearing empty. I knew I needed to find a gas station soon, or I'd be stranded in the middle of nowhere. My name is Tom, and I'm a traveling salesman in my early 40s. I've driven through all kinds of weather, but this storm was one of the worst I'd ever seen. I was wary of the dangers on the road, but I had no choice but to keep going. As I drove, I spotted a dim light in the distance. Squinting through the rain, I saw an old gas station, its flickering sign barely visible. The place looked abandoned, but I was desperate for gas. I decided to take the chance and pulled in, my tires splashing through the puddles. The gas station was surrounded by tall, dark trees, their branches swaying in the wind. The building itself looked run down with peeling paint and cracked windows. It didn't look like the kind of place I'd usually stop at, but I needed fuel to continue my journey. I honked my horn, hoping to get the attention of the attendant. After a moment, an elderly man appeared from the shadows. He was wearing a raincoat and seemed overly eager to help. His sudden appearance made me uneasy, but I brushed it off as the storm and my tiredness. "Evening," he said, his voice barely audible over the storm. "Need some gas?" "Yes, please," I replied, trying to sound calm. I'm almost out." He nodded and quickly started refueling my car. His constant chatter and overly friendly demeanor made me uncomfortable. But I decided to wait inside the station to avoid the rain. I felt a strange sense of dread as I walked inside, the wind howling behind me. As I walked into the gas station, I was hit by a musty smell. The dim lights flickered. The place looked like it hadn't been cleaned in years. The shelves were dusty, and the floor was covered in grime. I couldn't help but feel uneasy, but I told myself it was just the storm and my tiredness. The elderly man who had been refueling my car came in after me. "Name's George," he said. "Been running this place for years." "Thanks for the help," I replied, trying to be polite. His constant chatter and overly friendly demeanor made me uncomfortable. I decided to wait inside the station until my car was ready. As I stood there, I noticed a wall covered with old photographs. Curious, I walked over to take a closer look. My heart sank as I realized what I was seeing. The photos were of missing persons, all last seen in the area. There were dozens of them, dating back several decades. Each face stared back at me, a haunting reminder of their disappearance. The realization hit me hard. So many people had gone missing around here, and the thought of it made my skin crawl. The storm outside seemed to grow louder, the wind howling like a warning. My unease turned into a creeping fear. "Quite a collection, isn't it?" George's voice made me jump. He was standing right behind me, too close for comfort. "People go missing all the time in these parts. Sad, really." I forced a smile, trying to hide my discomfort. "Yeah, it's strange," I said, taking a step back. "Do you know what happened to any of them?" George shrugged, his smile not fading. "Some say they just up and left. Others think it's the woods. They can be dangerous, especially in a storm like this." I nodded. The photos, the storm, George's eerie friendliness. It all felt wrong. I needed to get out of there. But my car wasn't ready yet, and the rain was still pouring down. I turned away from the photos, trying to shake off the feeling of dread. I glanced around the station, looking for something to distract myself. There was an old phone on the counter, but it looked like it hadn't been used in years. The place was filled with junk and old supplies, giving it a ghostly atmosphere. It was like something you would see in a post-apocalyptic movie. The storm continued to rage outside, and I felt trapped. I needed to stay calm and think of a way to leave as soon as my car was refueled. The photos on the wall kept drawing my gaze, each one a silent plea for help. The more I looked, the more I felt like I was being watched. George's constant chatter faded into the background as I focused on staying calm. I couldn't let my fear get the best of me, but deep down I knew something was very, very wrong. As I stood there, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out and saw the battery icon flashing red. Great, just what I needed. My phone was about to die. I tried to send a quick message, but the screen went black. I was cut off. I turned to George, who was still hovering nearby. "Hey, do you have a place where I can charge my phone?" I asked, trying to sound casual. George's smile widened, but it looked more like a grin. "Sure thing," he said. "We've got an outlet in the back room. Follow me." I hesitated, but with no other choice, I decided to follow him. George led me through a narrow hallway to a small cluttered room at the back of the station. The air was thick and musty, and the only light came from a single flickering bulb. On an old, dusty table, I spotted a phone charger. "Here you go," George said, pointing to the charger. "Make yourself at home." I plugged in my phone and waited for it to power up. As I stood there, I noticed something strange. The floor and walls had deep scratch marks, as if someone had tried to claw their way out. My unease turned into real fear. Just then, George's demeanor shifted. He moved closer, blocking the exit. His friendly smile was gone, replaced by a menacing look. "So, Tom," he said, his voice low and threatening, Where are you headed? Got any family waiting for you?" I felt trapped. My heart pounded in my chest as I realized I needed to get out of there. "Just passing through," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "I should probably get going." George didn't budge. "Not so fast," he said. "You've got time. Let's chat a bit more." I glanced around the room looking for an escape. That's when I noticed a hidden door in the corner. It was slightly ajar, and I could hear faint muffled cries coming from below. My blood ran cold. I had to find a way out. "Actually, I think I left something in my car," I said, edging towards the hidden door. George's eyes followed me, but I moved quickly. I yanked the door open and stumbled down a set of narrow stairs. In the dim light, I found a trap door with a lock. Panic surged through me, but I spotted a shelf nearby with a bunch of old keys. I grabbed a handful and frantically tried each one until I found the right one. The lock clicked open, and I lifted the door. Inside, I found a small dark room with evidence of previous captives: chains, old clothes, and the unmistakable smell of fear. The realization hit me hard. I wasn't the first person George had trapped here. I crawled through the basement window, my hands and knees sinking into the muddy ground outside. The rain was still pouring, making it hard to see and even harder to move. But I had to get out of there. I pushed myself up and started running towards my car, my heart pounding in my chest. Behind me, I could hear George shouting. He had discovered my escape and was chasing after me. The fear gave me an extra burst of speed, and I reached my car just as George got close. I fumbled with the keys, my hands shaking, but finally managed to unlock the door and jump inside. George pounded on the window, his face twisted in anger, but I didn't waste a second. I turned the key in the ignition and the engine roared to life. I slammed the car into gear and hit the gas, spraying mud as I sped away from the gas station. My adrenaline was pumping, giving me the strength to flee. I didn't look back until I was a safe distance away. The gas station and George's dark figure faded into the distance, swallowed up by the storm. I kept driving, my hands gripping the wheel tightly, my mind racing with what had just happened. Even though I was now safe, the memory of the gas station and the photographs haunted me. The realization of how close I came to being trapped was overwhelming. I couldn't stop thinking about the other people who might not have been as lucky as I was. When I finally reached a nearby town, I pulled into a well-lit parking lot and grabbed my phone. With shaking hands, I called the police and reported everything: George, the gas station, the missing persons photos, and the basement room. The officers on the other end took my report seriously and assured me they would investigate immediately. As I hung up the phone, a wave of relief washed over me, but the fear lingered. The night had been a close call, and I knew it would take time to fully process what had happened. I sat in my car, listening to the rain, thankful to be alive and safe. In the days that followed, the police kept me informed about their investigation. They revealed that George had been luring unsuspecting travelers to his gas station for years, using stormy nights to his advantage. The missing persons on the wall were his victims. It was chilling to think how many lives he had ruined. Reflecting on the experience, I understood the real danger I had been in. I felt incredibly grateful for my quick thinking and instincts that helped me escape. The thought of what could have happened if I hadn't noticed the hidden door or the scratch marks still sent shivers down my spine. I decided to keep in touch with the police, offering any help I could as they continued their investigation. I wanted to ensure George was caught and couldn't hurt anyone else. The officers appreciated my willingness to stay involved, and it gave me a sense of purpose after such a terrifying ordeal. Resuming my travels wasn't easy. The experience had left me shaken, and I found myself more cautious than ever before. I was hyper-aware of my surroundings, especially when stopping at remote places. Every old gas station or deserted road reminded me of that night. But despite the fear, I also felt a newfound gratitude for my instincts and quick thinking. They had been my lifeline that night, guiding me to safety. I knew I would never take them for granted again. Life slowly returned to normal, but I carried the lessons of that night with me. I remained vigilant, always ready to trust my gut if something didn't feel right. And while the memory of the stormy night and the abandoned gas station would always be a part of me, I felt stronger knowing I had faced danger and survived. Every time I hit the road, I reminded myself to be careful and to appreciate the moments of safety and clarity. The experience left me more vigilant, but also more appreciative of the calm after the storm. The rain was pouring down in thick sheets, making it hard to see the road ahead. It was late at night, and I was driving home after a long, exhausting shift at the hospital. My name is Emma, and I'm a nurse in my early 30s. I've seen my share of emergencies, but nothing could have prepared me for what was about to happen. The windshield wipers struggled to keep up with the heavy rain, and the sound of the storm was almost deafening. I was tired and eager to get home, but I knew I had to stay alert. Driving in this weather was dangerous, and I couldn't afford to make any mistakes. As I carefully navigated the remote stretch of highway, the dense woods on either side of the road seemed to close in, adding to the sense of isolation. The only light came from my headlights, cutting through the darkness and rain. Suddenly, I spotted a flashing light up ahead. As I got closer, I realized it was an ambulance, parked on the side of the road with its lights still on. My heart skipped a beat. Assuming there was an emergency, I knew I had to stop and offer assistance. I pulled over and turned on my hazard lights. Grabbing my raincoat, I stepped out of the car and ran towards the ambulance, the rain soaking through my clothes almost immediately. The back doors of the ambulance were open, but when I looked inside, it was empty. No patients, no paramedics, just an eerie silence. Confused and concerned, I stood there for a moment listening. That's when I heard it, a faint cry for help coming from the nearby woods. My instincts kicked in, and I knew I had to investigate. Someone could be in serious trouble. I took a deep breath and ventured into the woods, calling out, "Hello? Is anyone there? Do you need help?" The cries grew louder, leading me deeper into the forest. The further I went, the more uneasy I felt. Something about this situation didn't feel right, but I couldn't ignore someone in need. As I moved through the trees, the rain continued to pour, and the darkness seemed to grow thicker. I kept calling out, hoping to find the source of the cries. What I found instead would haunt me forever. As I ventured further into the woods, the faint cries for help grew louder, guiding me through the darkness. The rain made everything slippery and the dense trees cast eerie shadows, but I pressed on. My instincts as a nurse told me someone needed help, and I couldn't ignore it. "Hello? Can you hear me?" I called out, my voice barely carrying over the sound of the rain. The cries continued, sounding more desperate. I quickened my pace, my heart pounding in my chest. After a few minutes, I stumbled upon a clearing. In the middle of it was a makeshift medical camp. There were tents, medical supplies, and equipment scattered around. It looked like a scene from a disaster response unit. But something was off. Everything seemed hastily set up and strangely abandoned. I moved closer, examining the area. Medical tools were strewn about, and some of the supplies were soaked from the rain. There were stretchers and IV stands, but no sign of any patients or medical personnel. The whole setup felt eerie, like a ghost town in the middle of the woods. "Hello?" I called out again, my voice trembling. The cries for help had stopped abruptly, replaced by an unsettling silence. The only sound was the relentless rain and the occasional rustle of leaves in the wind. A sense of unease washed over me. This didn't feel right. I looked around, trying to find any clues about what had happened here. That's when I noticed something that sent a chill down my spine. There were no footprints or signs of recent activity. It was as if the camp had been abandoned in a hurry, leaving everything behind. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my nerves. Something was very wrong here, and I needed to find out what. But the more I looked around, the stronger my sense of dread became. The makeshift camp seemed like a trap, and I was right in the middle of it. I turned to leave, scared out of my mind. As I moved, I kept my ears open for any sound, any clue that might explain what was going on. But all I heard was the rain and my own footsteps on the wet ground. The silence was deafening, and my heart pounded louder with every step. Realizing the camp was a trap, I decided to leave and head back to my car. My mind was racing with fear and confusion. As I turned to leave, I suddenly felt a strong grip on my arm. Before I could react, I was grabbed from behind and restrained. I struggled, but a group of masked individuals quickly surrounded me, their intentions clearly malicious. "Let me go," I shouted, but they ignored my pleas. One of them, a tall man with a deep voice, leaned in close. "We've been using the ambulance to lure good Samaritans like you," he said. "Too bad you fell for it." My heart sank as they dragged me back to the camp. They ignored my attempts to reason with them and my cries for help. Panic surged through me as they prepared to harvest my organs. I was tied to a stretcher, my mind racing with thoughts of escape. I knew I had to act fast. Using my medical knowledge and quick thinking, I managed to loosen the restraints around my wrists. I took a deep breath and faked a seizure, thrashing and convulsing on the stretcher. The criminals panicked, unsure of what to do. "She's having a seizure," one of them shouted. In their confusion, they momentarily loosened their grip on me. It was the opening I needed. I broke free from the restraints and ran as fast as I could into the woods, my heart pounding in my chest. The rain poured down harder, making it difficult to see, but I knew I had to keep moving. I could hear the criminals behind me, shouting and cursing as they chased me through the trees. I used my knowledge of the terrain and the storm to my advantage, weaving through the forest and using the noise of the rain to cover my tracks. My lungs burned and my legs ached, but I couldn't stop. I had to get away. Finally, I saw a break in the trees and stumbled onto a road. Desperation gave me the strength to keep going. I waved my arms frantically, hoping to flag down a passing car. A pair of headlights appeared in the distance, and I ran towards them, praying they would stop. The car slowed down, and the driver, a middle-aged woman, rolled down her window. "Are you okay?" she asked, concern in her eyes. "Please help me." I gasped. "They're after me. Take me to the police station." Without hesitation, she unlocked the door and I jumped in. As we sped away, I glanced back and saw the figures of the criminals fading into the distance. Relief washed over me, but the fear lingered. We reached the nearest police station and I stumbled inside, drenched and exhausted. I explained everything to the officers on duty, who immediately dispatched a team to investigate the makeshift camp. They commended me for my bravery and quick thinking, assuring me that they would do everything they could to catch the criminals. Even though the immediate danger was over, I couldn't shake the fear. The memory of the night and the faces of the masked criminals haunted me. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the eerie camp and heard the faint cries for help. It was a nightmare that would take a long time to fade. I stayed at the police station for a while, as the lady who picked me up had to get to her family and left. I was answering questions and helping them with their investigation. They assured me that they would find the criminals and make sure they couldn't hurt anyone else. Finally, as the storm began to die down, I was able to leave. The officers offered to drive me home, and I gratefully accepted. As I rode in the back of the police car, I looked out at the now quiet night, feeling a mix of relief and lingering fear. I was safe, but the experience had left its mark. It was a night I would never forget, a reminder of the dangers that can lurk in the most unexpected places. The thought of those who might not have been as lucky as I was filled me with a sense of responsibility. I knew I had to be more cautious in the future, always ready to trust my instincts and stay vigilant.